One is it really is a transformation for the company because you start to develop new business models based on technology. And for sure, it's about the API. But APIs at the end are not the magic. But the question is, what do you make out of it, right? We all have this dream, but how much of this is already reality of the consumer?
So you still need to offer something which is which a third party might want to integrate into their business. Yeah. So there is also this work behind the APIs, independently of them. Yeah. So you still need to have something of interest.
So to what extent am I willing to open up this mindset of partnering up and to not feel like it's a threat, but rather an opportunity to partner with others?
Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode of the API Resilience Podcast. I'm really happy to introduce you to our guests today. We have Matthias Büscher, who is the product manager at Deutsche Bank for their developer portal, and Joris Hensen. He's the founder and co-lead of the API program at Deutsche Bank. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm very glad to meet you and have you on our podcast today. Also, Christoph Van Thoma is my co-host. Hello, Christoph.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Joris. Hi, Matthias. Really good to have you. Really good to have you on the podcast. I'm excited to hear your story because it's like I keep seeing you at the API the Docs events and like at different community things, at the Dev Portal Awards, not to the least. So I'm looking forward to going a bit deeper into your stories and like how it all started, and how APIs are helping you with achieving your goals and what you need to do for the business.
Yeah, thank you. We are happy to be here today. Yeah, so
definitely,
and we definitely love to talk about the story. And as you said, I mean, we had this really nice occasion of meeting each other for the first time at the Developer Portal event. So that was quite a milestone too. Yeah,
so you were a winner. So,
yeah. Just for our listeners to be able to get you by your voices, that was Joris speaking. And how about saying hello, Matthias?
Yes, hello everybody. So I'm the other one. Yes. so no, you know my voice.
All right. Yeah, that'll help people get tuned in because we've got 4 male voices on today's podcast.
Yeah. So maybe we can kick it off, Joris, with a little bit of the background. Like, so because you're the founder of the API program. So how did it all started? Like, where did somebody come to you one day like, hey, Joris, I've got this little project here for you. Good luck. Or what was that? Did you have to like advocate for it? How did it get started? What got management convinced that this was a good thing to do?
Yeah, it started with me working in an innovation team back then on the technology side. We did something which is called corporate foresight. And corporate foresight is about designing possible future scenarios, and you look into trends, you analyze potential outcomes of your desired future, basically. And one trend that we observed was that other companies started to integrate products and services others have developed with the help of APIs, technical interfaces, to offer a broader range of products, to be faster in terms of product development, and all of this. And we said, well, this is a great opportunity. And seeing PSD2 coming, basically a regulation, for those listeners who are not familiar with it, basically a regulation that is about opening up the bank in terms of transactional data and allowing making payments accessible to the outside. We said, well, seeing this trend coming anyhow, we can say it's a huge opportunity to also open up, to offer a technical interface, an API, in order to allow potential partners to connect to banking data and build completely new products for our customers, and allow us to offer a wider range of products in different areas of your life. Because, at the end of the day, our life is not only around financial data, to be honest. It's about small moments in life, big decisive moments, and to be there with the client so that that's how the vision started off. And as you said in the beginning, it was really about advocating. So we had to start with a lot of PowerPoint slides to kick off the whole initiative.
So, and was it hard, or how? Because we had Koen Adolfs on the podcast, and he told a story about also PSD2 was one of the triggers for them. And then just explaining the value of APIs is just really, really hard, because people are used to thinking in products and like, is this going to be a product that I'm going to sell and we're going to make money with? But APIs can be products, but for the most part, they are not. For the most part, they're infrastructure. And it's like, basically it's the nervous system for your digital transformation that you're building. And that's a hard sell. How did people perceive that? Did you have any metaphors that you were using that were very useful?
Yeah, it's a very good question.
You're smiling.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I'm just seeing all of the different versions of slides that we prepared back then. And obviously, we also work with Lego bricks and explaining what is an API and why is it useful. And nowadays, a lot of people talk about open banking. But back then, people thought about open banking as if you would suggest that you open up the data center and everyone can walk right in. But to translate this into something that people perceive as a real business opportunity, we did a hackathon back then, an internal hackathon. And for the first time, I would say, people experienced IT teams in a different way. So IT and business teams worked together for 2 days. They were able to develop real prototypes, so PowerPoint slides. And then at the end of the 2 days, they presented prototypes of leveraging banking data in many different contexts. It was quite amazing, the ideas that we saw back then. Not sure if you remember that, Matthias.
Yes, of course.
At the end of the day, one of the managers said, okay, we now have to make it real. And that was the turning point and the starting point of the journey.
And we already did have a developer portal-ish website back then. I think it was a very basic documentation. We had a small simulator that was providing one endpoint, and you could do a few operations on it. Very limited, no production access yet. Very. We really played it safe, because I remember that one reaction from actually not surprisingly, people when we were running around saying, we want to expose services to the outside world, to third parties, and this may include personal data. A lot of people back then reacted with, what do you think you're doing? Yes. So we really had to be careful. Starting with, in the beginning, no production access. We make a simulator. People can get familiar with that. And so we really had to grow this step by step, making management also familiar with stuff.
So, and how many years are you in this journey now?
It's a 5th year. So it really started slowly, I would say, in 2015. The big milestone, I would say, was in 2016 when we did the external hackathon as kind of the market launch. Yeah. Also with the first real developer portal facing the outside. Yeah. And there was also a turning point in terms of that the winning team, it's a German Frankfurt-based startup called Twins. They actually developed the first product using our API. So for the first time, people could download an app available on the app stores and actually see, this is open banking. This app basically helps you to analyze your transaction, to give you an overview of all your contracts, allow you to easily switch a contract and do very nice financial projections with a finance guru. Yeah, we're giving you nice hints about financial stuff. So that was, I would say, the real starting point of the journey.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that struck me in your introduction, Joris, is how you were speaking about a very personal relationship between a person's life and the kind of financial decisions that they need to make and the relationship that Deutsche Bank wants to have with them through that. And it just surprised me a little bit, because I think when people think APIs, they immediately are thinking about, business to business relationships, and they're not necessarily thinking about those personal relationships. So it's interesting to me that that's where you started from, and your first application was a third party who was providing different views of a user's finance with Deutsche Bank than they would normally get from you. Do you feel any conflict? Does it take burden off of Deutsche Bank to have partners like that who are building applications using your data?
Trick question.
Well, I think the nice thing about this is really it's a win situation for all involved parties, right? Mm-hmm. So the customer gets additional value, maybe very specific applications, or a way to take banking data into different contexts, like another application that we offer as a cooperation with a tax declaration software that is pre-filling the tax statement with all of your personal data, financial data, and makes it much easier. Stuff like this, I think that's really nice for the customer. Then on the other hand, the partners, they get access to your customers to promote their app and build it in a different way using financial data. And then you as a bank, well, as I said in the beginning, you get a different way to engage with the customer, and certainly it helps to retain customer and also win new customers. So that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, I didn't mean for it to sound like a trap or a trick question, because I agree with your analysis there that it is a value add to both your customer and the bank, and that. Go ahead.
Yeah, of course, it's consent based, right?
Yeah.
So this is also a part of technology. We always had to think. We always had to add to our technology stack, if you want. The consent management, identity providing services, that kind of thing. And this, of course, added some complexity. Yet, it was not only just mandatory, legally speaking, but also is one central. Let me rephrase that. It's one way to demonstrate that you care about a trust-based relationship. Yeah, if you do this right. Yeah, look, dear user, this is how it works. Yeah, if you click this checkbox here, this and that will happen, and then the application will do this and that. So, if you, I think you can do lots of things right with it. Yeah.
As a consumer, I love having applications that are helping me not reinvent the wheel and do a lot of data entry when I know that the entity already has the data. Why are they making me regurgitate that data and reformat it for them? So to me, it looks like a win for your users. And the trust point you raise, I commented in another episode. I'm not sure it's been published yet, but trust keeps coming up, and it's certainly something that we talk quite a bit about in our Dev Portal strategy planning sessions, that establishing trust between your API program and your developer portal and those developers is critical. But you make the point that it's also critical that you're establishing the trust through that program to the end consumer as well.
Sure thing, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Because, open banking is maybe something we talk about in our bubble, right? The financial bubble, but no end customer talks about, hey, open banking. Yes. So they have to understand, all right, I'm in full control whenever I decide to use an application that actually access my financial data, and I allow access to this financial data. So I think this is really, really important.
And a convenient way to remove, for example, a revoke a concept.
Definitely,
Kind of
yeah. And it's a huge responsibility for the API program, or in terms of, generally speaking, to orchestrate the partners that you onboard, that you select, and the way you build up this ecosystem of the offering, basically. Yeah.
What is your, like, I love looking in crystal balls. I love thinking about like what's going to be the future. And so I'll have a few of these questions for some of the trends that I'm watching. But I think what I'm seeing when I'm looking at the bank, like at the banking sector, it's like, it's a sector in flux. And we're still trying to figure out like what is going to be the new value differentiators. And how is this landscape going to evolve, and how is it going to be split up? And you're one of the front runners in this space in doing APIs. There's people that are still getting started. You're 5 years in. So how are you seeing this? Like, where do you think are the big gains that you're already seeing? Like, okay, here there's a lot of value that our business is getting from this program. And I think there's some level, there's like innovation and stuff like that, but also like, are you already seeing initial use cases that are like, okay, wow, we hadn't expected this. This is interesting. And, we're winning deals here because of this. Do you have stories like that?
For sure, we have stories like this. So,
sure.
So, what kind of a question was that?
Yes.
No, but to me, it feels like almost a different generation. So I feel the beginning of the API program and when we started off was like, okay, we start to build the technology basis. The first developer portal, the first APIs. The first APIs were around transactional data. So you could say, probably pretty simple data that you make accessible through the API, whereas the second generation, or the generation we are in right now, I would say, is more about making the next step in terms of, for instance, making banking products accessible through APIs. Like we just released an API for opening an account with us, so that the API becomes like a digital sales channel on one hand. And then, probably referring back to Mark's question earlier, because we started with the retail customers or the private bank side. I also think that right now, what surprised us is that we see a huge demand from business clients to access their own accounts through the API and integrate it very independently in the way they want it into their IT landscape. And I think that that's another trend and a huge opportunity that I see to further go down this B2B line in terms of adding more functionality to the basic product we started with, which is called access to own account, and include payments, include an automatic way to get notifications, to reconcile incoming payments, for instance, in a very independent way. So I would say, generally speaking, it's about giving you flexibility to work with your banking data, like with Lego bricks. Yeah.
So is this also, I guess you're also working, like what you just described, one of the big pushes I'm seeing also is this shift from more REST-like models where you have to go and poll for a change to more subscription type APIs with webhooks and asynchronous APIs and things like that. Is that's also a trend that you're seeing, or that's still?
Yeah, So we just released our the event-based.
You mean a transaction notification?
Yeah, and maybe it's a bit too early to see to say that this is going to be the future. Yeah, I would be a bit careful here, but
perhaps from the perspective that you as a customer want to define your own events, and like if you think in Lego bricks, then you want to build it the way like, okay, you get a notification because this happens and this triggers the payment.
The way that I've described it is like if you have a body, so you have certain nerves that trigger certain events, like make this muscle contract, but then you also have nerves that are like constantly sensing and pulling and trying to find out like what's going on in the world. Exactly. And there's this. It feels like this is now the next wave that's coming. Like also OpenAPI spec, the next version is going to have webhook support, and we had Lorna Jane Mitchell talking about that on a previous podcast. So I think it's not published yet. But it feels that there's that shift coming.
That's a very interesting point that you're making, and I think it also refers to how other industries are starting to open up. And we had this developer portal meetup early this year with different industries.
Thank you for organizing it.
But what I find interesting is if all of those industries start to open up, what happens if you start to combine different services, right? What happens if things in your household are integrated in your financial projection because they know what is going to happen, they know how much electricity they use, all of this. And what happens if all of your bookkeeping becomes more automated and you feel like, it's really convenient because I don't have to think about the different things and adding it.
Mm-hmm. You just pointed to a soapbox that I am going to stand on for a minute. This is a hypothesis in progress, but I think that what excites me about digital transformation and what people are doing with their APIs, especially in the way you just described, how your partners are integrating their data and your data into their, it's their data through your systems into their IT infrastructure, that this is the new source of productivity and value creation, that enterprises have focused so much on increasing operational efficiency that's where a lot of their margin has come from in recent decades, through things like computers on the desktop and distributing computing, the internet, making information more accessible. And now we're kind of at this next wave where we've got this digital transformation and the API economy that is creating value that exists not within a particular organization, but because of the connection with the organizations that produce something that's truly bigger than the sum of two parts. And so are you seeing that, or am I smoking a pipe here? And is this a pipe dream?
I would say at least we had the same pipe dream. Yeah, I would say. And I have two perspectives on it. One is it really is a transformation for the company because you start to develop new business models based on technology. And for sure, it's about the API. But APIs at the end are not the magic. But the question is, what do you make out of it, right? How do you bundle data, different data endpoints, different APIs to make a solution? And from the perspective of who's driving this, I think one of the key roles that we have in the team are our API product managers, who really have to think from starting with the technology, the idea, to actually market the product. So you really need to have people like this in the organization to think it through and to think in different value chains and to be very open-minded, to talk to different industries and to imagine what is possible. And then on the other hand, you have the consumer side, right? And there, Matthias and me, we had a very interesting discussion just lately about, we all have this dream, but how much of this is already reality of the consumer? And what does it take to really fly in not just for early adopters, but more in the sense of the mass market now? And
there's the interesting question, the API, people, API consumers do not want to to use the API because they want to integrate an API. So there needs to be something behind it, a service which makes it valuable or potentially valuable for the consumer of the API. So, and this is also an interesting world. Yeah. So you still need to offer something which is which a third party might want to integrate into their business. Yeah. So there is also this world behind the APIs independently of them. Yeah. So you still need to have something of interest. Yeah. Yeah.
The API is the infrastructure. It's not the goal in itself. And I think this was also because in 2018 you were our first winner of the Business Decision Maker Awards on the DevPortal Awards. And this has been one of my pet peeves for years now, is like, yeah, I know developers hate marketing, but you're still doing developer marketing. You still have to explain what you're doing here and why it's valuable. So why did you have such a good documentation for decision makers? Like what was the insight that got you to do that?
Well, I think we always were in the situation to justify what we want to do and what we do in front, for example, of internal stakeholders at the bank. So we already were in the situation needing to explain to a non-technical audience or less technical audience what's in there, what we are doing, and so we already came from there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Plus, of course, we need to address somehow people. That might be a decision makers, but less tech savvy, for example.
To add what you just said, Matthias, is part of the mindset is that we went out to talk to potential partners really early on. So we went to different kind of events, cross-industry events, to learn from partners. We did some really nice formats to learn, all right, what is the data we should start with, up to how should the processes be designed? And I think this is reflected in the documentation as well, as to, okay, we know these people, we always have them on our mind, and this is for whom we are designing the products for.
So this was the innovation DNA that started your API program?
I think so, yeah. And I always have to smile when I think of those events. For instance, we had the API cocktail bar where people could design literally their own API drink with different sets of data.
This is the cocktail metaphor, yeah? So, listen, we had to find that, everybody knows what we're talking about.
I want to hear more about that. That sounds pretty interesting.
And then we had people complaining, where are the real cocktails?
I like that. It's just cool.
I'm really interested in the fact that you started off with a hackathon, and I'm wondering how many totally off the radar ideas you got from the hackathon that set goals inside of Deutsche Bank of things that you could do or wanted to do because of things that people either were able to do that you found unexpected or pointed in a direction that was unexpected? We
really had some crazy ideas at the hackathon. So one team was coming from London with their own car to connect the car to banking data. So that was really funny. But I guess at the end of the day, the solutions turned into reality, which were much closer to the heart of the bank. At least I think that's important in the beginning to really fly. It is necessary to be close to what people can imagine, really work with, and to relate to, right? I guess it's only now that I would say IoT cases could work, or it's really there's a huge potential in it to explore it, or mobility cases. So this is something where I feel that's also something I learned from my time in the innovation team is innovation can happen, has to happen at the right time.
Timing is huge.
Yes, definitely. So and how one of the other issues I see is curation. So like discoverability and findability is like key for a dev portal, but then you also need to so you have findability, which is letting people find the API, but then there's also discoverability, which is about, are you able to put the right API in front of the right person at the right moment when they're looking for it, when they need that? And do you have any insights about that? Like how to get the it's kind of like a matchmaker almost thing.
Yeah.
Have you thought about things like that with the dev portal, or are you seeing some of those stories happen?
Yeah. So this is a topic that, it's challenging. For me, it comes a bit from this information architecture world. So how do I organize information in a way that it's accessible and people can, it takes little time as possible for someone to find what someone is looking for, right? And that's a super interesting challenge. I think a search for APIs is something which I don't have proof, but I think it should go somehow into this direction at some point, because you need to find a way to not just rely on these huge index pages, where you have filters and whatnot. Where should this end? Once there are a few hundreds or something, you need a different paradigm of looking for things, finding things.
Yeah.
And I also see parallels to the development of search within the web itself, actually. Starting with these index pages somehow, and then more working with cross-references between websites that promote each other higher in a specific ranking, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
maybe on top of this is also the imagination that you, or the, I don't know, this imagination that you spark what is possible with, for instance, in our case, financial data. So we have discussed this quite a lot recently, is whether or not, why don't we have some like small landing pages for different kind of products, and how do you generate this? This is what I can do. And I feel like it's really important that you can imagine what you can do with financial data, that you start to think in solutions yourself, that someone else can also say, this is something I can build on, and then include this into, for instance, digital marketing, and when someone types in something into the search engine, that your developer portal pops up. And this connectivity, I think that's also crucial.
Yeah, this is super interesting. I do not have, I don't have, answers or something here, but I the more the API world, let's say publicly available API world, is growing, the more you have to think about how do you organize this information there.
I think it's really important for people to be thinking about this, because Google just announced that they're going to include usability as one of the PageRank algorithm that they've got. And so we talk quite a lot about making sure that your pages are accessible, that follow good accessibility guidelines, but also usability and developer experience is going to become much more important, because so many people are still finding APIs first through a Google search, and your SEO will be impacted by your usability in the not too distant future. I'm not sure when they turn that on.
That's So something like a search engine optimization for API specification in a strict sense, like Swagger file or something,
I love how you're thinking, because we've been talking about actually validating how people are using your dev portal. Like, you actually came to me directly, like, hey, what can we do with this? I like that kind of trust but verify, and start looking at, like, okay, how is this working? And we've been exploring ways to start doing that with our UX team. Like, we've been working on a questionnaire and some of those things. So it's like, have you gotten any further with that idea, Matthias?
No, not yet. No. This is yes. So this idea was to have some kind of a double-blind, scenario-based usability testing of a portal, because this is also super interesting. How the hell do I find out if the portal is good? I mean, besides the developer portal awards, of course, which is of course the reference, but how the simple question: how do I know that my portal is working? Yeah, and it's not. I mean, the whole thing. Yeah, not an isolated feature or something. The whole thing from end to end. How do you do this with a complex web application? Yeah?
We've seen some people adopting, like, real KPIs, like on a page level, even sometimes, like saying, like, okay, we're going to measure, or like, this page belongs to that team. These are the KPIs of the performance indicators, and we're doing well, we're not doing well. What do we need to change? That kind of stuff. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah, we lack lots of background information of the user. The users can be the user group is not necessarily a how do you say, homogeneous.
There is not the developer, right?
That's the thing, and you don't know the manpower behind the user. It might be a team, it might be a single person, it might be new to the portal, might be experienced, and all this.
And then you also have to serve the developer, and at the same time the product manager too, who also want to understand, okay, what's the offering like?
If these are two different persons,
And there's also, like, different types of developers, because you have the enterprise developer, you got the garage developer, you got the gun for hire developer, which is also a really important type. It's people that are doing implementations for other people, and they all need different information. Like, the enterprise person, he's just like, my boss told me to do this thing, just give me the docs. The garage developer is like, I have no clue what I'm doing, but integration.
And this is interesting, because I do have this discussion frequently. So when there's a user requesting a specific bit of information on the portal, he's saying, I didn't find this or that. Could you provide a piece of documentation that helps me out with a specific question? You immediately get into a discussion with developers saying, what if. Where's the tipping point where we say yes or no? So this is the thing. So where is there a point where we say, this is something that developer really, if he really should know that, or just Google it and find it somewhere else. But let's not provide this information ourselves. And where's the point where we say, okay, good point. This is something you might really need to know here.
And yet they have something in common, because everyone who visits the developer portal wants to understand as fast as they could, what does this API offer? How do I get started? How does the onboarding look like? How can I test it? Where's the test data and stuff?
These are the specific Deutsche Bank Developer Portal questions. Of course, they need to be the answers. Yes.
I need to introduce you to Michael Meng from Merseburg University. He's actually been doing research about this exact question. The trade-off between speeding up development by giving more information, or speeding up development by giving less information, depending on the audience.
But if you look at this from this perspective, isn't it funny that if you look at it from the surface, you could argue, well, it's just a developer portal, right? You build it somehow, no? But then you get to all of those questions and you see how essential the developer portal is, and how tricky.
Yeah.
So a lot of dedication from Matthias is going into the portal. Yeah. Bottom line.
And lots of frustration also. Yeah.
The obstacle is the road.
Yeah.
So I wanted to one of the things that we've been asking most of our guests is like, so this whole COVID era, and do you see any areas where being one of these early adopters of APIs in the banking scene, where you can see that this has helped you to help your customers to be more resilient, or to help your business to be more resilient? Do you see that, because we had this, we were ready to step in and take advantage of these new needs that were suddenly there? Do you have any of those stories?
Well, definitely we observed that there's more demand for APIs, and more demand in the sense of simplifying processes and digitizing from front to back, right? That's something we observe. Interestingly, just recently from an internal or the partner organization we work with, to speed up the process to manage a higher volume of contracts much faster, stuff like this. So I would say that's also my hope, is that it helps to generally accelerate making more API data accessible and provide more front to back digitized processes to the outside.
Yeah, other than that,
it doesn't even have to be your own customers, just because you are looking for API stories. Like, have you seen? Well, one of my hypotheses is that this is like, it's an infrastructure, it's a platform that we're building for businesses, and it's a platform for reactivity, interconnection, and adaptivity that allows us to react faster and more, and less in a cheaper way than we could react before, because we now have this infrastructure that goes halfway already.
So perhaps one personal observation is that, for instance, I think it was beginning of April, but pretty early in this whole COVID area, the government of Germany, they set up a We versus the Virus hackathon. Yeah. And where you might just typically see developers working in their space, I guess there's, for the first time I saw the trend, okay, people jump into day-to-day problems. They try to see, okay, where can I access data to solve different problems people started to face with COVID. So I would say, if this trend continues, then it definitely helps to integrate more areas of life, and the stuff we were talking about earlier in this podcast, interconnecting things. No?
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say, although it's maybe a bit boring, but the more I would expect that the more a business model needs to switch from something, the more that business model needs to be digitized because of COVID, because for health reasons, the more likely APIs as technology will benefit. Yeah, in brackets, so benefit from that. Yeah.
Are you saying that it's kind of like the program will grow as a result of coronavirus crisis?
Yeah. I would say that, actually, because the opposite would be weird.
Yeah. We've seen, I think so far I'm seeing two types of stories. One is, this was downtime, so we had time to invest and to spend time doing things that otherwise we don't have time for, but we know that this is important, so we're now going to do more API and like work and that kind of stuff. Or the factory is closed, so we can like tinker with the machines. That's the kind of pattern I've seen. And then the other one is, oh my God, we need to react because our ship is on fire. And if we don't really quickly do something, this is all going to burn down. So I think those are like the two main stories that I've seen happening.
Probably depending on the industry and
Yeah.
a lot, yeah.
So the question that I wanted to ask is really about what digital transformation means at Deutsche Bank, because financial institutions tend to be more conservative and more risk averse than some other industries. And when you talk about open banking and digital transformation and exposing that data through your APIs to a lot of people, that sounds like, they've got security concerns. You're upsetting the traditional models of interaction. Was it your experience that this kind of goes back to where Christoph started? Did you run into those kind of barriers? Do you still run into them? And because now you clearly have data about the program and the value of the program.
Yeah. So it's really, if I look at the journey, it's really a transformation. And as I said earlier, when we started, people felt, all right, open banking needs to open up. And then what we did was to involve the different parties very early on. And one thing that we've learned while talking to partners and talking to the outside was that we need to have a quick onboarding process, for instance. Yeah, it cannot take a startup to 6 months to get into, to work with our data. Yeah, so we turned over every stone. We involved the different departments from legal, compliance, data protection, everyone, to design our 2-week onboarding process. And we have invited the same parties to our hackathon to work with the teams on site. And that proved to be very valuable from two perspectives. First, for the participants, because they got immediate feedback. Would my prototype work legally, for instance, stuff like this, before I further invest time in programming. And on the other hand, our colleagues learned, all right, this is what we are talking about. It's really an opportunity. It's a lot of fun. it's fun solution. It's fun working with those people. This attitude of, this kind of refers a little bit to the not invented here syndrome, right? So to what extent am I willing to open up this mindset of partnering up and to not feel like it's a threat, but rather an opportunity to partner with others? So this is something that really evolved, not just looking at our program, but other digital initiatives. And and up to the point where we are now, where I would say we really talk about new roles and mindset that open banking requires, in terms of you need to have people who understand the technology, as well as be able to talk to partners and to sales, because it's somehow technology related. You cannot really differentiate it. I mean, not completely. Yeah, and then this refers to having perhaps new roles, like how we call it, the API product manager. But I think it's a very good thing. And it's funny that you're asking this question, because something I remember from our early days was that some of the one manager said, a key deliverable of this API program, even though it's not the objective, is this transformation. And independently of where we end up in terms of what the product portfolio will look like, at the same time, it will contribute to the digital transformation.
I just wrote down, that you've kind of outlined some really great ideas for a playbook for people trying to start an API program, and your experience, I think, follows some best practices. You were very smart about how you went about it, engaging your internal community, engaging potential partners, and working together. It's great. It's a great story, and
it's also interesting because personally, I didn't I knew you hear a lot about hackathons, And I had a bit of a like, what really comes out of that. But it's consistently we're hearing this story about hackathons as being like a transformational event that really made it real. And it got people like, oh, actually, this is exciting and interesting. So I'm upgrading hackathons in my playbook.
Yeah, for sure. I feel the same way.
Yeah,
it's interesting. They just serve many purposes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's that's the thing.
But at the end of the day, an API is so abstract. So how can you touch it? How can you feel it? No? And then you have these events where you meet people, you see something. I think that's also very important.
Well, one of the things specific to your hackathon that you mentioned that I want to amplify is that you had business people working with developers. Because so many hackathons are presented as kind of a developer-only event where you're getting IT people sitting in a room trying to do things that IT people can think about. But I always tell people that through my years of managing software development teams, the hard part is not writing the code. The hard part is understanding what code to write. And that is translating the business problem, the business needs, into the thousands of questions that a developer needs answered in order to deliver the right thing. And it's very wise of you from the outset to have had business people working with, the IT people. And to me, that's a different kind of hackathon. And that's part of what I would say is on my list of, the playbook for putting an API program together.
And invite management, and we had lots of management attention actually.
Yeah, that's like the magic ingredient. Yeah, so it always sounds like straightforward, and you did this and this and that. Of course, you need to have management support, but I think it's Mark. What you just said is. I think it's both ways. Now, it's also that the business people understand what's possible with technology. And it sounds so simple, but it's actually also a question of the mindset and the approach and how you approach things. And
it's to me, it's very akin to the kind of magic that happens with language. And whenever you learn a new language, you're also learning new ideas that different languages have paradigms for, and language and culture are very tightly coupled. And you have to be very careful in your communication to make sure that all of those things that are kind of implicit in the language and implicit in the culture and implicit in your business get translated to the developers. And that was, I've seen lots and lots of outsourcing programs fail because they didn't recognize that it's not the code. There's not a magic incantation that is cheaper overseas. What's really important is that communication. And I'm not at all saying that offshoring is can't be successful. I've just seen it done where people don't recognize where the technology sits in terms of the value stream. They think that the technology will just happen. And it actually turns out that communication and understanding and making all of these things that are implicit in your culture, in your language, in your business, making those things explicit, because the code is, it's tangible.
It may boil, to me, such things often boil down to the question: what makes good product management?
And also the role of the IT. Huh?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
It sounds like a little bit, if you think of the 90s or the 80s, this waterfall IT, where a business person would have handed the requirements well written to the team of developers, and then expecting the perfect product. There are a lot of jokes about it. But this is, on the other hand, why I feel like prototypes are so important, because when I think of communication, there's lots of misunderstanding in communication. It just happens naturally. It's probably not possible to avoid at all. But then if you have something you can look at, you can touch and feel, right? This really helps. No? That's the other magic I like about the mixed teams and today's approaches of rapid prototyping. What the outcomes of hackathons.
I could go on and on with this topic.
Yeah, it's kind of a sweet topic for me.
I also love it because it's like language is also constraints that gives us power. Like we are constrained by our words because they limit what we can think of, and at the same time they make it so much easier to think of the things that we already know. And it's similar with APIs. That's what you're doing. Yeah.
Maybe words make things.
Yes. It's
to join this philosophical discussion. Maybe.
Yeah. It's this. It's the constraints that make things happen, and it's so weird because we always think that it's about freedom. It's not about freedom. It's about having the right constraints picked that are functioning and that are helping us to achieve what we need to achieve. And APIs are exactly that also. They're constraints that limit the information and that limits the information how it's being shared, because instead of giving you a file with like all the information, you're constricting it into a very specific format. But it's done in such a way that it actually empowers you to do more rather than to do less. And that's it's fascinating, I think. Yeah.
I want to ask if there's anything that you want to talk about. We're coming to the end of our time, and I think that we've covered a lot of ground and had some very interesting discussions, and I think this is a good place to start wrapping up. But is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with that we haven't gotten to?
I would say, I'm not sure who the listeners are, if they're already involved in an API program, but I can only say it's really worth setting up an API program in terms of the internal transformation that is going to happen, the output that you will receive, and perceive this as a way to think in technology-based business model, translated into new opportunities, into a new role for your company, a new way you can engage with your customers. And I think the more industries we see opening up, the more interesting it will get. No? So that
there are things that just do take their time. It's you cannot. There are specific things you cannot speed up, or you cannot skip.
This is something you want to say to the managers listening to the podcast. Have patience with the API program.
Once in a while I was in the situation where I got asked, how did you manage to convince someone in management that this is a good thing? And so and I just had to say, you know what, in the very end we had to over and over convince people that this is working, and it just took time.
It takes time to build new businesses.
And the trust relationships within a company, actually. So this takes time. You need to prove that this is working, and then people may trust you a bit more, and this kind of things. So
it's very organic. It's like you're growing an ecosystem, and you have.
Definitely, I think that's the right word. You have to train this muscle of opening up yourself. It's nothing you can buy off the shelf.
That's nicely said.
Yeah, well, I love Kevin Kelly's book Out of Control. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's talking about the parallels between biology and technology. And he's talking about ecosystems and how ecosystems work. And It's a fascinating book because he talks about like, the starting condition matter, but then you just have to like let it play out and become something like, and it becomes resilient, it becomes stronger because there's all these relationships that are there, but you can't just reinvent it. You can't just say, okay, this is the ecosystem. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
So it's a journey for sure.
Yeah. And the training, the muscle metaphor actually is nice. Yeah. And it's maybe even about, use it or lose it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you could go that far. I don't know. It just came to my mind.
You're making me think about an API program in terms of, growing a plant or growing a garden, and all of the root and network that has to be created inside under the ground, and reduce the results above the ground outside of the organization. So if you imagine that the ground itself is kind of the line between the inside the organization and outside the organization, it's and the developer portal and the API programs is the plant, and then the result is the fruit.
Nice.
I'm going to water my tomatoes after this.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
Well, this has been a really great discussion.
Yes.
I want to thank you, Matthias and Joris, for talking with us. I forgot to mention at the beginning that people can go to developer.db.com to see your developer portal. It is an award-winning developer portal as chosen by public members of the API, the Docs, and Dev Portal Awards community. They voted, your Dev Portal a winner. And you can follow Joris at Joris_Hensen. That's JORIS_HENSEN on Twitter. And you can find Matthias on Twitter at M_BUESCHER. And so check them out. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, it was great to hear your stories and have you on. We'll put this information in the show notes. And if people have some follow-up questions for you, hopefully they can find you on Twitter, or they can contact us here at Pronovix.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark and Christoph, for having us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Please let us know what kinds of topics you'd like to hear on other podcasts, or particular guests that you think we might invite to the program. And let us know how we can make this a more valuable program for you and the audience you're serving internally at your organizations. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the API Resilience Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for our latest episodes. You can contact us at podcast@pronovix.com, and until next time, be well.